Welcome back to another episode of the Aquademia podcast. I'm your host, Justin Grant.
And I'm Maddie Cassidy.
And today we are sitting down with Becky Holt and Dr. Megan Davis, both from Florida Atlantic University Queen Conch Lab. We are going to be exploring the restoration work that the Queen Conch Lab is doing in the Caribbean. It is an amazing story, one that you need to listen to the entire episode to really get the full effect of the amazing work that is taking place. Before we get into that conversation, remember, if you want to contact the podcast for any reason, you can do so by filling out our online form located at globalseafood.org/podcast. We are on social. We are on Instagram. Our handle is @SeafoodAlliance.
And the best way to help us get the word out about our show is to leave us a rating or review on whichever podcast platform you listen to us on. And if you enjoy this episode, then be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode.
And we will see you at the end.
Welcome to the Aquademia podcast.
Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately need to eat more seafood.
This is a pioneering industry with a whole lot of people who have really good ideas and a lot of experience and are unafraid.
Aquademia is your go-to podcast for a fresh take on all things seafood.
Becky, Megan, thanks so much for joining Maddie and I on the Aquademia podcast. How are you both doing?
Doing great. Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking a lot about Queen Conch Lab. So this isn't a really exciting project, one that actually is award-winning, but we'll get into that later in the discussion. But before we get into any of that, Becky, could you just start off and introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Becky, and my current role is Assistant Director at the Florida Atlantic University Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute's Queen Conch Lab. I manage our international program development and communications. I've had about a decade of experience in the seafood sector, including leadership roles with GAA, now GSA, and GSSI. And my background's in brand strategy and film production. When I was at GAA, I produced these documentary short films, about 7 of them, for the organization. And they were focused on ocean conservation, seafood systems, sustainable farming. And yeah, I still do some of that to scale the lab's impact.
Megan, how about yourself? Could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes. Thank you. Well, my current role right now is a research professor, but also the director of the Florida Atlantic University Queen Conch Lab. I've actually been working with Queen Conch now for 45 years, and I fell in love with the species in the Bahamas actually 51 years ago. My first conch farming job was in the Turks and Caicos Islands, where I was the co-founder of the Caicos Conch Farm, which is still the first and only commercial conch farm. It's currently no longer open, but that was really where I began my career and my work with conch, and been working with it ever since.
I want to talk about Queen Conch Lab. We want to go all the way back to the beginning. So what was the original idea or problem that you were trying to solve, and how has that vision really evolved since then?
Sure. So the concept of the Queen Conch Lab began in 2018. And the first project that we worked with, and we still have to this day, is working in Puerto Rico. And that's in partnership with a conservation organization called Conservación Conciencia, and also with the Naguabo Commercial Fishing Association. That's a very interesting aspect of that first project on the ground, is that it's both with partnership with a conservation organization and also with a fisheries, also actually nestled in a commercial fishing operation in Puerto Rico. So this project was funded for several years with the Salton Salt Kennedy NOAA Fisheries Funds, which is a fund that's used for research and development projects to support U.S. Fishing industry. We also have been funded by USDA and Puerto Rico Sea Grant for this project. It's very unique in the fact that it is in a fishing association, and it employs family members from the association and from the community. And Becky's going to share a little bit more how we sort of went from that into where we are today.
Yeah, we have a wider vision to have a Queen Conch farm in every Caribbean country. And our mission is to grow the conch for the sake of the species and the seagrass ecosystem and for the people that depend on the fishery. And now we have, as Megan mentioned, several community-based projects throughout the Caribbean, in addition to Puerto Rico. We've got the Bahamas, 3 in the Bahamas, Jamaica, Curacao, with several pending, and also in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Turks and Caicos is an example of another one. And yeah, we're still going.
Was there any early challenges that you encountered when you were trying to get this project up and running?
We were very fortunate that things fell into place the way they did. So it was very exciting. In 2018, I met Raimundo Espinoza. We were both serving on the committee of the Marine Fisheries Advisory Committee. And we met each other, and he's from Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, which is the U.S. Caribbean territory, as we all know. And we just started talking about conch and how exciting it would be to form a project together. And so I decided to take a trip down there because I think it's always really important when you go to another country or another place where you don't live is to meet the people there and to really find out if they're interested in this project. Like, we can conceptualize it as much as we want, but it's really is the project going to be accepted? Well, it was accepted with open arms. The fishermen, the president of the Fishing Association, and so we had this amazing opportunity to build this first lab in the Fishing Association. And then we were funded by Saltonstall Kennedy NOAA Fisheries funds, and we began the project in earnest in 2019. We did have a gap there during COVID, but we quickly picked it up. And that was actually, I used that time, I would think, somewhat wisely, because we ended up writing the manual on how to grow conch. So even though it was out there in different papers and things, this was the how-to. And so, so I think if anything, challenges are just making sure that you think ahead and that you include the community from the very, very beginning. And so that helped us to really move into a model that we still use to this day.
That is incredible. You literally wrote the book on Queen Conch. So how about for our listeners who might not be familiar, and especially with your wealth of knowledge and experience on Queen Conch, Megan, why is Queen Conch such an important species specifically in the Caribbean, and also maybe just generally speaking, like ecologically, economically, and why is there such a need for it?
That's a great question. I'm going to bounce that over to Becky, and then I'll also put some words in there at the end.
Yeah, so ecologically, Queen Conch are important to Caribbean ecosystems because they help keep the seagrass beds healthy. So as they move and feed, they're constantly cleaning the overgrow on the seagrass blades. So they're keeping that habitat and that critical nursery really healthy for all marine species. And it's also important for carbon storage. We may get into that a little bit later, and then economically, they've been a staple fishery for generations, and they're deeply tied to the culture and the livelihoods across that wide region. So the thing that makes them challenging in terms of restoration is that they are slow to mature. So it takes about 4 years for a conch to reach reproductive age, and their density needs to be somewhat high for them to be able to find each other to mate. So when populations drop too low, they struggle to recover on their own, which is why our initiative with restoration aquaculture can really help.
That's actually really interesting when you phrase it that way, because even if there is a population of Queen Conch, if it's too small, they're not going to survive. They're not going to do very well. They're going to eventually fade out. So
yeah, just to add a little bit more to that, Thanks for that great overview, Becky. I was just thinking about, since my time working with conch, I started working with conch and knowing about conch in the mid 70s and had my first job in 1981. So really back then, there was still somewhat of a thriving populations of conch because it was more collected artisanally. And so it wasn't until there was like a way to transport large quantities of conch in a refrigerated type of system that the commercial harvesting of the conch really increased. So I've seen a lot of major decline since my time working with the conch, from fishing pressure, from habitat degradation, and then climate change has caused a lot more frequent storms. And when the frequent storms come in, they sort of bury some of the shallow habitats where the conch are, or there's a lot more rain coming in and washing that into the nearshore areas. And then, of course, we've seen a lot more warming oceans since our work with the conch. And so, a lot of our labs have to have a chiller attached to it just to keep down some of the warming temperatures. Becky mentioned how important they are as herbivore grazers in the seagrass beds. And I think it's also important to restore those habitats. So having conch population in there actually also helps to restore the seagrass habitat. So and bring in more biodiversity of species back into the area. So it's like sort of like a feedback loop in a way, So not only the conch will benefit, but the seagrass will benefit and the other species will benefit.
Can you explain a little bit about, I know seagrass is just so important, but how does the queen conch really help with that restoration? What exactly is happening that's keeping that seagrass healthy?
So seagrass are like the rainforest in a way. They're one of the really important habitats, as Becky mentioned. They do store carbon. They do store nutrients and food. They are a very essential habitat, just like many of the other ocean habitats are for nurseries and for the beginning of sea life, along with mangroves, along with coral reefs. And so the seagrass blades, what happens when there isn't active grazing going on, the blades themselves start covering up with more epiphytes. So photosynthesis, the sunlight can't really get in to help the seagrass to thrive. And so the conch, it's gentle grazing. They're not actually eating the seagrass, but they're grazing and cleaning the blades. And we've seen in our research where you'll have conch inside a very large pen enclosure, and they beautifully graze the seagrass. And then on the outside, it has a lot more of the epiphytes on the outside. So that's really, the conch are sort of like these little bioengineers that are going around cleaning off and then leaving some nutrients behind as they're cleaning, through their waste products. And so it's a really nice feedback loop in regards to their relationship with the seagrass.
I'm glad I asked that question, because in my head I envisioned them more like a lawnmower, and they were kind of taking care of maybe some of the seagrass that was like slowly starting to die, and they would target that clearing. And kind of exactly. But no, that's not the case. So that cleared it up for hopefully our audience and for me.
That's great.
I also think, as just a clarification point, a lot of people get queen conch confused with carnivorous conch. They're vegans. We call them sweet little vegans. And if you've never seen a carnivorous conch eat something, you should go on YouTube right now and look at that. It's wild.
Yeah.
If we can find a appropriate, I'm using air quotes, video of that, we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we will.
So I'm going to shift gears to the mobile hatchery approach. So if I just mention a lab to someone, they're probably thinking of a stationary building. That's not the case here, right? So one of the things that stands out in your work is this mobile hatchery approach. So how did that idea come about, and what has it allowed you to do that you couldn't do with a traditional lab setup?
Yes, that's great. So we do have two labs that are considered we call them stationary labs. So those are Puerto Rico and Curacao. But then we have these mobile labs, as you said, which has really allowed us to expand our reach. So the very first mobile lab was built and delivered to Great Exuma, Bahamas in 2022. And this idea was developed in partnership with a colleague of mine, Catherine Booker, who works with the Bahamas National Trust. And she said, I don't have a building. I don't know where we can have a conch lab. But and on top of that, we live in a fairly remote area and we want to be able to go into the community. So we brainstormed together and we came up with this idea of a mobile lab that could be built here at Harbor Branch and have everything in it and then be put on a ship and shipped overseas. And so that really has given us so much flexibility. And we've actually, that particular lab has moved a couple locations. And one of our team members and I will be going down to Great Exuma in a couple weeks. And we'll be putting it in a very unique area called the Ferry, which is in Great Exuma. And we're going to set it up so that they can. So we're moving it from one area to a slightly different place, but still near the same community. And that's just one example of this mobile lab has moved around so that we can find the best location and the best seawater source for it. And I think Becky has a few more things to add to this.
Yeah, it's exactly. I think it's just so great what it allows us to do because we can really get into these remote places. And the fact that I don't build them, but the fact that our team at Harbor Branch is so fantastic at building them at this point, that it really unlocks a new phase for us where we can deliver more of these to many places in the Caribbean. Because many also don't have the infrastructure to build a hatchery in a building, like Megan was saying.
Right.
It's very plug and play. And we like to say it's hurricane proof in the sense that it can be tied down or moved if there's an incoming hurricane, which is really important. Really important. It also brings jobs to the communities that don't necessarily get tapped for jobs, and provides training that can really be life-changing for a lot of families.
What does a typical day look like when the hatchery is deployed in the field?
So that's a great question. And
that might be a hard question. Yeah, I think now that I've said that, I feel like there probably isn't a typical day.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm just thinking like we start early. Sometime between 7 and 8. And the first thing we do is when we walk into the mobile lab, we wash our hands and we get ready for the day. And I say that like earnestly because, sometimes we've like maybe been somewhere like eating food or something, and we don't allow any mosquito repellent or any sunscreen or anything like that on our hands. So we check to see that the larvae and the air is on in the larval tanks. We check to see that the eggs are incubating correctly and that the algae is running. And then we start to do our microscope observations. And then we find out how they did overnight, how well they're eating, how well they're growing. Are the eggs ready to hatch? Is the algae ready to transfer and feed? And let's do cell densities. And then we plan our morning. And it's very fresh in my mind because I was just down in Cape Eleuthera at the Cape Eleuthera Institute and teaching, like we're on the ground teaching when the mobile lab first arrived. That's one of the things that we do right away with the teams there. And then we proceed to work the morning doing water changes, feeding the larvae, maybe going out in the field and getting more eggs if we're ready for eggs. And then if we have juveniles, we feed the juveniles. And so it takes a good, it can take all day to do some of the chores. Some days it's a half a day. And it's usually a minimum of 2 people working in the lab at any one time.
So if you were to paint a visual for our listeners, when you're talking about these tanks that hold water, like how big are they?
So the ones that we're using now are 250 liters. So they're big, but they're relatively small as well. And they have what we call a parabolic shaped bottom, a nice smooth round bottom instead of a conical shape. And that allows, and then we have an airlift in the middle, and the airlift allows the water and gently moves the larvae. What's interesting about conch larvae is that first of all, they're oligotrophic, which means they live in very clear water. And they're very low density. So we hatch them at about 100 per liter. And then by the time they're ready for metamorphosis, they're somewhere around 10 to 20 per liter. And they don't need a lot of food like oysters and clams and mussels need a lot of algae. These particular veligers don't need as much algae because of their nature of living in the oligotrophic waters. They're also really, quote, big for larvae. By the time they're ready for metamorphosis, they're 1 millimeter in size, and they have these 6 beautiful lobes. So
you mentioned metamorphosis, and you've also mentioned that it takes about 4 years to reach maturity. So what does the period look like between the hatchery and then metamorphosis, and then what does it look like when the conch reaches maturity?
Right. So we do the hatchery and early nursery stage inside the mobile labs. So we have tanks for the larvae, and then we have trays for the metamorphosis. And we induce metamorphosis. We have to have a queue for them to go through metamorphosis. And the best queue we've found is the seagrass blade, because the seagrass blade has the food on it, like all the epiphytes, all the diatoms on it. And so we take a few of the detrital blades from the seagrass bed, which means that those are the blades that have fallen off and that are easily to gather with your fingers. And we put them out, and then they go through metamorphosis on the blades. And then they take about a year to reach to like 3 inches or 7 to 8 centimeters. And then at that stage is when we put them out into the field we acclimate them in a pen, and then we release them into the nursery, and preferably a nursery where there's already conch around, so they can have a little safety with their friends. And and then it takes about another 3 years to reach sexual maturity.
There's 2 little add-ons I'd like to add to that, Megan, because I think they'd be interesting to the audience. We forgot to mention what time they hatch.
Yes.
I think you need to describe this.
So the conch eggs hatch at 9 o'clock at night, and almost consistently. And they like to hatch with synchronicity, meaning like all together. And they have these little trap doors inside their egg capsule. They're in a strand. First of all, it's a mass. And the mass is covered with sand, so that's very well camouflaged. There's no predation at that stage. But when they go to hatch, they have to wind their way out of these strands, and they have these little trap doors that open, and then they start finding their way out. And sure enough, we found out that it was 9 o'clock, and it took
that
me.
Is so crazy.
Yeah, like I can just remember the nights that I would go in, or the days, every hour, checking. When are they going to hatch? When are they going to hatch? And then all of a sudden, it was like, oh my gosh, it's 9 o'clock. And it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Everything happens at 9 o'clock.
And the other interesting thing is when the conch are, ready to be released or into that nursery that Megan mentioned, we call that conch ranching, because they're grazers and they need a good amount of space to move around and to graze. And what's the distance they need between each other, Megan, typically?
Yeah, so in the wild, they're found anywhere from about 2 conch to 5 conch per meter squared. So that's, as Becky's saying, they need a lot of space for grazing because they're herbivores. It's like cows, they're eating grass, and they need a lot of pasture land to raise a cow. So it's the same with the conch. And sometimes we call them conch cowboys, the people that are taking care of them, because they're underwater doing the ranching, as Becky mentioned.
Oh, that would have been such a good podcast title, Conch Cowboys. I don't want it to be a little misleading, but that is so catchy. I almost want that as a t-shirt.
It's a good hook.
So I know that a lot of your work as the Queen Conch Lab involves community involvement and community engagement. And I love the approach that you initially took back in 2018 of reaching out to the communities that you were considering launching this in and making sure that this is something that they would even be interested in. Because a lot of times companies just assume things and think that, of course, people would want this. Why wouldn't they? And then they get off the ground and it's like, oh, actually, nobody asked for this. So I love that you took that approach. And I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on how these local Caribbean communities and fishers are involved with the Queen Conch Lab's work, and what sort of changes you've seen over the years since 2018 when you launched, or 2019.
Yeah, thanks for that question. This question is really near and dear to our hearts, and is really the base makes this project work, this Queen Conch Lab program work. And so all of our labs in the Caribbean wouldn't be possible unless we had a strategic partner on the ground. So we start with that. We start with somebody, some group, some maybe collaborators that we already know that want to get involved. And we know that then that way they can run the day-to-day work, because they're the ones that live there and they're the ones that will manage the staff that are local staff there. So all the labs are operated by the local community members, and some are scientists. Some went away to school and they went to university and got their bachelor's degree, or maybe in some cases a master's degree. And what's so exciting is that, well, first of all, they're hoping that when they return, there's jobs for them. And what's so exciting about the work that we're able to provide is that we have the capacity to bring in those trained scientists or those trained local people. And so they stay in their islands. They don't have to go away to get a job. So that's one of the impacts that we've been able to do for some of the scientists. So in other cases, our labs are also run by the local community members. And so they may not have science background, but they have a really keen interest to learn about the conch. And they have all those wonderful soft skills of wanting to care for an animal, wanting to pay attention to the details, being able to record and communicate the information. And so it's been very exciting for us also to have a variety of different staff members. And these staff members are actually not hired by us, but they're hired by our partners. And we're the ones that come and train and work with them on sometimes a day-to-day basis. We do have fishers that are working with us. We have fisher family members that are working with us. And this capacity building is one of the most rewarding parts of our Queen Conch Lab program. We're also, I know for me personally, because I have done so much training over the years, that when I go down to a lab and we may visit them at each lab anywhere from 2 to 3 times a year. And when I go down and I sit there and watch the staff training other staff and other interns, and it's just so magical for me to see that happen, that I know that the legacy of this work is being carried on through others and through generations, and the knowledge won't be lost, which means that there's a really good way to ensure the future of the species and to ensure that will continue to be a way of life for the islands.
I just got the chills when you said that. That is
100%.
so beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's the whole vision of in order for this to be successful, this is what it should look like. And for you to walk in and actively see it happening that way is so powerful and reassuring, and it must make you feel so good.
Yeah, thank you for that. It does.
We also, one other thing that we're doing down in the community is we've been operating a program, separate from our aquaculture work in Grand Bahama and in Abaco called Conch in the Classroom. And in this program, we partner with a local NGO on the ground to provide programming and curriculum to government schools, grades 3 through 6. And these kids are so cute. But we bring an aquarium into their classroom, into each classroom, and bring in 2 juvenile conch that the students are responsible for and they need to care for. And they learn about the conch through lessons and hands-on experience. And we feel like learning to care for the conch firsthand draws them closer to understanding its importance and why it should be conserved, restored, respected. Many of these kids have never seen the actual animal up close. You know, they don't interact with it. And so, we love that program.
So you said that when you first went down and investigated if this was a viable project for these communities, that you were met with really, really great reception. And I'm curious if it was like, you make it sound like it was so effortless, but like building buy-in and trust with people that are strangers is really hard to do. So I'm curious how that process went. And maybe it's just because like Queen Conch is just so perfect, but I'm curious how that process actually, what that looked like.
I'm glad we make it look effortless, but there's so much work behind the scenes. For me personally, I've spent a lot of time in the Caribbean. So but what I find so interesting is every Caribbean nation and country has a different culture. And so, for all of us that are working on the team, we know that it's really important to respect the culture that we're going into and that we don't live there. So we want to learn from the community what's best for them. And we do have stakeholder meetings. We had in Puerto Rico, we brought all the fishermen together, and there's about 22 fishers, both women and men, fishing in Naguabo. We brought them all together and we sat them down and we talked about the project so that they didn't feel like the project was actually going to compete with their local fishing. And in fact, it was going to enhance it and that there would be jobs available. And so from the very get-go, we did that with the project and let them ask questions. And ever since that first time of doing that, we all have such a great respect and an interest in each other. And the fishers themselves, they have so much knowledge to share that they're always on the water. So we also ask them, what's it like out there fishing? What do you see? Are they, and in Puerto Rico, they bring the eggs when they go fishing, and they take such good, gentle care of bringing the eggs into the hatchery. And we learn from them. In fact, in Puerto Rico, if they see a female laying eggs, they won't collect her. They won't harvest her. They'll let her continue to finish laying eggs. And when we bring in a little piece of egg, it's only a small portion of those eggs, and the rest stay in the wild. So really meeting people and understanding and asking them questions and asking them what's the best way to do this and who would you like to hire and how would you like to operate the program within the guidelines that we can provide for them. And we check in all the time with the team. So we're always like, I have my phone, I have every day I have at least 5 or 6 groups that are texting in about how the day's going or if they might have a question. And so between actually Robinson Bezerto, who is our operations manager, and I, we help guide them and do that virtual training. So I think there's more to say on that, but I'll leave it at that for now.
And just to add, in a lot of places, like Megan was saying, there's a language barrier too. So you're using Google Translate or you're, miming with your hands and that is challenging, but you make it work. And I think on the flip side, like you were asking, Maddie, it is effortless because you're going in, you're treating people with respect to gain their trust. And that should be effortless. You're asking them about their family. You're including them. You're laughing with them. You're having a meal with them.
Yeah.
You're on the ground getting dirty and wet and disgusting, just like them. So it's, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the only way to do it. And I think it's through time as well. And yeah, showing up.
So shifting gears a little bit, I'm sure at this point in the conversation, some of our listeners are probably saying, wow, this is such an amazing project. I wonder if it's ever been given an award. Well, guess what? It has. Yeah, everyone was probably like, "This, you know what? This needs some recognition because this is amazing."
That's a great lead-in. I didn't know where that was going, Justin.
You never know with me. You just never know. So last year, in 2025, at the Responsible Seafood Summit, which is the global seafood conference that Global Seafood Alliance puts on, the Queen Conch Lab won the Innovation Award in the aquaculture category. So if any of our listeners don't know what this looks like, it's one of my favorite parts of the conference. So we have 3 finalists from each category go on stage. They have 5 minutes to make their innovation pitch. Then there is live voting that happens afterwards. So we can see in real time who wins. So Queen Conch Lab won last year's Innovation Award. What was that moment like for you, Megan? Because you were the presenter, you were on stage and gave this presentation. So what was that moment like for you when you found out that you won?
It was very exhilarating to first have done a pitch in 5 minutes, just to be there.
That's hard to do.
Yep.
And so Becky and I worked on that very hard together, and it was great to be able to have that opportunity to share that, first of all, with such an amazing audience that was at the Responsible Seafood Summit. So it felt like, and honestly, it still feels like, this enormous honor to be recognized for the work of the Queen Conch Lab team and the partners. And for me personally, it also felt like, those 45 years of devotion to the Queen Conch, and to just know that now on a larger scale, more and more people know about the Queen Conch and the work we do and why it's so important. And to have that sort of that recognition for the conservation and restoration of this species, and to have more support and more voices. And so this is the very first time that our Queen Conch Lab has received an award, and we just are so appreciative of that support and that recognition.
I agree. I think 5 minutes. I know why we set the presentation to 5 minutes, just because it has to be really concise. But there's so much detail from the whole story can't be told in 5 minutes. So it must have been really challenging to say, okay, how are we going to accomplish this in just a 5-minute pitch?
And honestly, Megan is an incredible orator and storyteller, so I wasn't concerned about our message getting across at all. I was more concerned about if the audience would be judging based on something that impacts more large-scale farmed species like salmon and shrimp and tilapia. So I was like, will they think it's important? Will they get it? So when we won, it was super exciting. And then for me personally, it was a full circle moment for me, having come back to the GSA stage on the award side of things versus leadership side. And it was wild. I'm having more full circle moments these days. I don't want to think about what that means, but too often I'm having them now.
I think that's a really important point, though, Becky. Like, a lot of the attendees at the summit are people from companies that are like big shrimp companies, big salmon companies, or like big feed companies. So it must have been even more validating for this audience who isn't necessarily familiar with the importance of Queen Conch and the work that you're doing, to come in and say, oh no, this is the innovation that we are behind. This is the one that we want to win.
Yeah.
It could have been our edge that it was unfamiliar too. So maybe
definitely
they learned something.
And I can also I concur that Megan is an incredible speaker. Your presentation was beyond inspiring, and it stirred something in me, which is why I was really excited to have you on the show today. So congratulations on that.
She's Obama level.
Actually, though, she is. It's incredible. Aww. It's just like your passion comes through so evidently in how you speak and like your reverence for Queen Conch. It's so good.
Oh, thank you so much.
So since receiving the award, has anything changed for the project? And maybe that's like as a result of the Innovation Award, or maybe it's just because many months have passed since then. So like visibility, new partnerships, how has the work evolved since we last spoke with you 9 months ago?
Yeah, so I say that since receiving the Innovation Award, definitely felt like a confirmation for the vision and for the mission, and it feels like we're definitely on the right track. So that in itself was a very powerful moment for us to have that confirmation. Then we also shared it with many of our funders that have funded the mobile lab. Like that was one of the first things that Becky and I did, is we reached out to funders such as Builders Vision, such as the Longer Tables Fund, which is a philanthropic foundation of Jose Andres. And we knew that being able to share that with funders who had been able to help us build mobile labs, and we've now built 9 mobile labs. So it's really exciting to be able to go back to those funders and share that. And they were equally as excited as we are about receiving the award. And I would say that the visibility of receiving the award has been very noticeable for our program overall, because we've shared it very widely. We had a press release that our Florida Atlantic University communications team put together for us on that. You all shared it very widely as well. And then we have our social media channels that we put it out on. So just being able to share the visibility of the award, but also of the good work that you all are doing. So it was really, really increasing that visibility all around has been so important to us.
That's great. So what does Queen Conch Lab look like in the future? Where do you hope, what is your vision for the next, I don't want to say 10 to 15 years. I want to say like 5 to 10 years.
Can I jump in 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead, Becky, please.
Thank you. Just on a little bit on your last question and kind of bridging into this one, part of our work now, after winning this award and moving our program forward, is we're working with a group called BC Plus, Blue Carbon Plus. They are a Nature Conservancy and Conservation International mashup, I like to say. And they're incredible partners, and they are helping us with a feasibility study for commercial Queen Conch.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So as much as our main mission is restoration, conservation, capacity building, we are also working to determine whether something like the Turks and Caicos conch farm back in the day could work in today's world. And so we're treating it as also a very important seafood product. And we keep trying to get into those industry rooms where its value is being discussed and the future of it is being discussed as a product. And we feel the Innovation Award definitely helped us with that. So we're working also with Dick Jones from Tide Point Group on this initiative as well.
Yeah, that's great, Becky. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a really interesting project, being able to look at the feasibility of a commercial conch farm. You know, this was the conch farm began in 1983, where I was co-founder. And so much has changed in the aquaculture world. So much has changed with the marketing side as well. And so to be able to be selected by this new initiative that's Blue Carbon Plus that Becky mentioned, and also the Nature Conservancy and Conservation International have come together to make this new initiative work. Along with Dick Jones, we also have a Novasi that's also very much part of it. So it's wonderful to be able to bring in experts from all over and look at it in different ways. I've always been quite excited by that in all of our projects, that innovation does come in from those that are looking at things in a different angle or in a new way that I haven't seen it before. So it's always so welcoming to bring in those new ways of doing things. So I think really in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be looking at more mobile labs. We still want to continue on our vision of a conch farm in every Caribbean country. And I think there's something like 26 countries in the Caribbean. So Becky and I do spend quite a bit of time talking with different people from different parts of the Caribbean about the opportunities that exist. And, I think the more we can involve the community, the more we can have more partnerships, the more the conch will be better understood, and that there will be a future for the species. I think that's something that's just so important for everybody involved that knows about conch or that don't know about conch yet, but will learn about conch. And bringing a conservation restoration message is one way to reach many, many people and to work together as a team for the species.
So if any of our listeners want to get involved, want to learn more, want to contact either one of you, what is the best way for them to do that?
So we have an amazing website that Becky can share the information on that. And then we also have social media on LinkedIn and Instagram. But Becky, why don't you share how the best way for our listeners?
Sure. So we have a website, queenconchlab.com. Very hard to remember. And we have an incredible Instagram, which is 100% run by Megan. She is an Instagram wizard, and it's educational, it's exciting, it's a really great page. I highly recommend it. How many followers are we up to now, organically, Megan?
Yeah, over 19,000.
19,000.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Wow.
So you can find us there, also on LinkedIn. And if you reach out to us, we will get right back to you. We have a small team, and we're always interested in speaking with folks about anything conch related.
And if our listeners want an easy place to find all of those resources, they will be in the show notes. So while you both have the platform in our listeners' ears, is there anything else that you want to get out there to our audience?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, I suppose I'll end on a personal note, because as we started our talk today, our discussion today, I mentioned that I've been working with conch for 45 years, and that I fell in love with the conch in the Bahamas 51 years ago, and I had a vision then that I needed to work with the species because it needed to be able to be grown in the future for helping. I mean, it's not the only thing that can help the conch, but it's one way to help the conch for the future. And so this is having these mobile labs and having these labs in general throughout the Caribbean, and being able to be on the platform with you all today allows us to spread the word about the conch, but it also personally allows the legacy that I want to leave behind in the hands of many, many people, so that I know that there'll be a future for the conch.
Awesome.
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, Megan and Becky, thank you both so much for joining Maddie and I on the podcast and walking us through from the beginning to the future of the Queen Conch Lab. And I know that Maddie and I are both going to be following closely to continue to see how things are evolving within the project.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Folks, that was our conversation with Becky and Megan. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you want to get involved, want to contact them for any reason, please check out the show notes. All of those useful links are there. As a reminder, if you want to contact the podcast, you can do so by filling out our online form located at globalseafood.org/podcast. If you want to follow us on Instagram, our handle is @SeafoodAlliance.
And if you enjoyed this episode, then be sure to leave us a rating or review on whichever podcast platform you listen to us on.
We'll see you at the next episode.
Bye.
Ciao.